All right, if we could take our seats, and if I could have 4 volunteers to hand out our agenda. Somebody who is finished eating or able to put their plate down and hand out agenda to people. Come and take your seats. Here's one. Thank you, Marlene. Somebody else want to help? Ken, thank you. I guess you. Thank you. All right, so he'll start on that side. Well, all right. It got quiet, so I guess we're either eating or ready to start. I don't know which. Eating. Not ready to start, just eating. Well, hopefully everyone got an agenda, which is an agenda on one side and a construction budget update on the other side. Oh, we'll do that later. Yeah, we'll do that later. Thanks. So we want to start today just to say it's going to be a short meeting. And also, those of you with children, the people at West Coast Kids didn't realize that they're also feeding our children lunch. So Brady and Vicky have done that. They're serving, they're with them. But in a little bit, we'll have a break, and you can maybe bring your children up for the second half of the meeting, and then they can go with us next door. Oh, we got new childminders downstairs. All right, don't worry about your children until we take the tour next door, and they can go with you to the construction zone, but no ladder climbing. Actually, when we go next door, it's a construction site, so be careful not to trip and fall because the guardrails aren't up everywhere, and no ladder climbing. So short and sweet, we want to talk about elder succession planning. You've given some input in recent weeks. We'll just recap that, and then we'll give a quick construction budget update and a few leadership needs, and then we'll go next door and have a look at where the construction's at so far. So just as a refresher, in case you're new today, over the past month, I guess, we've been saying to the church that we want to plan for a next generation of elders, and a process that we've used many times before is to have a combination of the current elders praying and nominating, and then coming to the congregation and hearing input from you. And a few things that were said in the last month, in case you were traveling or missed it. Tony Sands and David Ferguson, currently elders, are going to move into what we call advisory elders. They don't cease to be godly, wonderful people who will pray for you at any time, but they do get the freedom to not be at meetings twice a month and be part of all of the active stuff that keeps them busy. So we call it succession planning. And over the past few weeks, then we've asked the congregation, would you give us names of people that you might receive as an elder, people that you could see serving in that way? And as is often the case, we have a wide number of names given. I think this time there were 13 different men who were suggested as someone who could serve as an elder. Something that was new this time is it felt like we had a lot more comments saying, here's someone that I know, but I feel like there's a lot of people I don't know. And just a sense of we're fully back to normal after COVID, but we did lose some space in there. And there's a number of comments that came in of saying there's just a lot of new people, and I don't really know everyone. And so there's just an openness to say, here's the part I can see, but maybe I don't see everything. And so that's a good thing for us to be aware of as well. But in addition, there might be a little bit of a difference in what people are thinking about when we talk about eldership. We thought we tried to explain that this time around we're looking to go younger, and yet some of you did suggest people who are very much wise, godly, wonderful people, but they're older than David and Tony, or the same age as David and Tony. And so those names, we just felt, no, we actually want to go younger. And part of that is simply a representation of looking for the congregation to be represented well, and so we're looking for leadership from different age groups. So we're not going lots younger this time, but we also found that the names that the elders had were very similar to the ones that were mentioned most often from the congregation. And we asked 3 people to serve as elders. We're looking for 2. And 2 people said, I'm very honored, but I just can't do it at this season of my life. And so we just want you to know that we're going to add 1 person at this time, and there might be another one added in the near future. But for now, we're going to start with 1, and we're very, very thrilled about that. And the process is that we recommend today someone who's willing to let their name stand, and then we give you 2 weeks to respond back, like a time of testing, with, hey, wait a minute, don't you know that guy is a total crook and he ripped off my brother-in-law? Or whatever other question you might have, feel free. But that's a time of safety where we're not just saying this is it, but we have a time, and then later we confirm that, yes, this person will serve as an elder. And later in the end of May, we will have a time when Ron McLean and Steve Thomas are here where we lay on of hands and have an official commissioning at that time. So today, for you to have a chance to hear from this person, we're recommending with all of our joy, Arjuna Hool. And we've known Arjuna and Rowena for a number of years. Some of us have the privilege of being in the same Connect group with them at the Gorlick's group, which I'm part of. And Arjuna has also been serving the school for a number of years as the person that people meet with when there's a financial aid need, and they would meet with him to review their situation. I had to think of you, though, when Luis was talking, and I thought, you know, Luis is going on about being a bit of a more introverted person. And Arjuna is saying yes with heart and soul, but public speaking isn't his first love, right? And yet he is a very, very friendly customer service kind of a person. That's his job, right? And by the way, Luis, I thought it was funny that you describe yourself as an introvert, and yet your first day in the country, you walked down the street to find a new church. And a few hours later, you jumped in a car with Addison to go to Vernon on a ski retreat. So he can't be that much of an introvert. But I've asked Arjuna if he would just share a little bit of his background, he and Rowena's life together, and give you a chance to get to know him. And then you can feel free to ask a few questions afterwards and put him on the spot as well. All right?
Thank you, David. Good afternoon, church family. I started to get my ego up a little when you said you're looking for younger, but then you quickly brought it down to reality. So yeah, thank you. Before I share a little bit of my story, I do want to just say how humbling and it's an honor to be considered to be an elder. My Christian journey began in the 70s as a kid one Sunday when I was asked by an older lady in our apartment complex if I'd been to Sunday school. An invitation was made, and through the bus ministry offered by the church, I began attending Forward Baptist Church in Toronto. After a few months, my parents also started attending, and Forward became our home church for the next 20 years. It was a place where I accepted Jesus as my personal Savior, was baptized, and where the importance of God's word and teaching were gratefully sown into my life. 25 years later, it was also the place where Rowena and I got married. I saw how my parents' nominal faith grew in deep and trusting relationship with Jesus. We were taught about giving to the Lord first, despite not having much materially, and where daily family devotions and prayer time were part of our upbringing. One of the biggest sacrifices my parents made was to send me to Christian school from grades 3 to 13. At school, I was a rule follower for much of my time there, and only in high school did I begin rebelling and not wanting to be so Christian. I can distinctly remember one of my teachers just shaking her head and at who and what I was becoming. It was then in grade 12 when the Lord touched my heart through something as insignificant as a book report, which altered the course of my life. It was a report I'd written on Frankie Peretti's fictional book, This Present Darkness, that opened my eyes to the spiritual world, the power of prayer, the battle for my soul, and that God fiercely loved me and had his angels fighting battles in the heavenlies for my welfare. I'm not sure why, but the report got circulated among the teaching staff, and me and my renewed faith finished high school on a positive note, including the same teacher who referred to me as one of her boys by the end of grade 13. After university, I began working at TD and also made the decision to attend another church and the young adults group where I met Rowena. We began our personal and work lives, and in 2009, made the decision to move to BC. In 2016, after moving close to the neighborhood, we began attending West Coast. Some of you here today would have heard our testimonies in 2019, and I'll be brief and highlight just a few things that have had significance for me and why I'm here before you today. The Lord has been faithful throughout the highs and in the very deep lows of my adult life. I've experienced his goodness and seen what I would describe as miracles that took place in my life. I've also felt his deep love for me in those difficult times when there had to be healing and eventual restoration. From the very start, we found a welcoming community here at West Coast, and I've had the opportunity, as Dave mentioned, to serve in areas of men's ministry, summer internship mentoring, the ushering team, as well as the financial aid for West Coast Christian School. Which kind of brings me to the present day and seeking God's direction in service as an elder. In the working world, I'm still with TD and in a leadership position, but my personality is such that I'm much more comfortable and enjoy serving in the background. For this reason, I seek your prayer for wisdom and discernment, if affirmed, to take on this responsibility. My prayer is that God will give me the eyes to see and the ears to hear and be responsive to help meet the needs of individuals in our church, as well as the wider corporate body. I'm really encouraged to see and hear the noise and laughter of the kids at our church. And despite being a transient city, we see young families coming and wanting to make West Coast their home church. I'm excited and motivated to see the energy, faith, and passion of our young adults. And what God is doing in their lives. It's awesome to see, And I'm thankful for the faithfulness, wisdom, and the example of the longtime members of this community and the godly heritage we have here at West Coast. I know this is a result of much prayer and from the leadership, as well as from all of you here. Seeing our church family unified in pursuit of bringing God's kingdom to this community, city, and beyond is also a prayer and commitment of mine while being called to serve as an elder. I'm trusting God for his direction, leading, and equipping for this calling. And thank you, church, for your consideration in that respect. Oh, now the hard part.
Well, that's a great overview. Thank you so much. Let's just open up for a few questions that you might have. Easy or hard, doesn't matter. Just ask a few more questions to fill out this story a little bit.
Could start with easy.
What's your favorite food?
Ooh, that's a good question. Question was, what's your favorite food? By heritage, we're Sri Lankan, so I would have to say Sri Lankan food is still our favorite, but outside of Sri Lankan food, I think I'd have to say probably Thai or sushi. Be close up there. And living here is great for that. So.
Hey, but if you're ever stuck for a restaurant, you need to call Rowena and she will find you a restaurant.
That is true. She's good at that for sure. Thanks, Georgia. That's a great question. Not so much the verse, but more the story is just in the Old Testament when Moses was trying to figure out, how he should lead or what he should be doing. And, God's telling him, I've chosen you to do this. And he's like, okay, I can do this, but I need to see more. I need to, show me your glory. And then when, God says, okay, I will show you my glory. And then he describes who he is as his character, being gracious and compassionate, slow to anger, abounding in love. And I'm like, wow, God, that's not someone telling us who they think you are, but that's who you say you are to us, And so that just sticks out to go, God, no matter how deep we go down, no matter how high we go up into the mountaintops, you are there with us. You never leave us or forsake us. So, yeah. Ken.
Sorry for the hard call.
That's all right.
How are you going to be if TD goes under?
How am I going to be if TD goes under? Well, that's it. Yeah, okay, we can talk about that. But I mean, if that happens, not only myself, I really feel for a lot of people in this room because, that would mean, I think, not just employees of the bank, but a lot of Canadians would be impacted. Thankfully, I won't go too much into it. I do think our banking system is it's the most shorted bank in that sector. You're right. And I went long, really hard TD the last week, so I have full confidence in our bank. But that being said, I do think, just really quickly, I do think, we're in a different situation than the U.S. We're capitalized very differently. We don't take as many risks. So, again, I have to be careful what I say because I work for TD, but I don't see us going that direction. But God help us if that does happen, for sure. Yeah. Thank you. Addison.
What's one of your favorite ways of serving?
That's a great question, Addison. Thanks. It's kind of like what I said. I just like to do things kind of in the background with not much fanfare. If someone needs help, I'd love to try to volunteer my time to help out that way. I'm not going to be kind of the person who's the life of a party in the sense, the one cracking the jokes, where everyone's drawn to, but I really like the one-on-one connection, if I can, and just hearing their story, trying to relate, if there's any way that I can be an encouragement to them through my life experience. And just kind of having that one-on-one time and being able to kind of serve in that way. And because I know it's amazing how everything just tied in today with the community and being an immigrant and I can relate to a lot of that things. And in our interactions sometimes with people, it's especially with the school and parents who are doing all their best in situations like this, that Ken's referring to, where it's difficult times for a lot of people. But to kind of show God's faithfulness and go, yeah, I was there. My parents, they came with nothing, 50 years ago, but still nothing. And yet they sacrificed everything to send me to a Christian private school. And all it takes is one generation to change that, right? So if we can give people at our school that hope as well, and parents who are really committed and, sacrificing to send their kids there, then why not do all we can to help them, and make that a reality? So I'm really passionate about that, to kind of share my life story with them that way, to give hopefully parents and immigrants, new immigrants, like, a hope that, they can have a better future, right? So, yeah. Tristan, sorry, and then Tristan. That's so important, absolutely. Do you want to come up? Okay, sure.
Your question was for me to respond how I feel about Arjuna stepping in. Sure. Yeah. I had reservations, to be perfectly open, just about time commitment, because I didn't know what it meant. I didn't know what eldership at West Coast Fellowship meant. Having said that, Arjuna's dad was a deacon at his church. We've got family who've been elders, so I know the commitment. It was really important for me that if this is how Arjuna felt led, to really support him. And so that was very important to me. I was also very open with Pastor Dave about, my job. Sometimes I'm not around. I travel a little bit. It comes and it goes. It's seasonal. And I wanted to make sure, how would that fit into church? If I wasn't here, it's not because I wasn't supportive, but simply because I wasn't physically present. But personally, I've seen Arjuna as a leader in our home. I see him as a leader amongst his friends. When he talks about service, I know he's quite humble. I do think in terms of gifting, it's acts of service. That's where he's been gifted my whole life that I've seen him, right? When he talks about being behind the scenes, very much behind the scenes, sometimes he'll initiate where he sees someone who needs support, great at one-on-one. And when you talk about not being the life of the party, I do think amongst your group of friends, he's got a small, very close circle of friends who often come to him for advice. Most are believers and some are not. And that to me speaks to his leadership, but also loyalty and friendship and who he is.
Thanks, Rob. Mylene. Ooh. Yeah, thanks, Mylene. That's a good question. I love sports. I love anything sports. I play soccer since I was a kid. Love playing soccer, American football, tennis, whatever. Except for the Denver Broncos, right? Doo-doo? Right? Doo-doo? Sorry, sit. Objecting already. No, and so, yeah, I love to play sports. There was a time I loved reading. Can't tell you really the last thing I've read, except, Daryl Johnson has a good book on Revelation. I started reading that. But yeah, it's so, yeah, that's what I like to do. Yeah, thanks. And eating food. Yes. Where do you see yourself in 5 years? Oh, wow. I think I get up every morning and ask myself that. It gives me the gray hair. But yeah, no, it's a really good question. I was talking to David about this week, actually. God willing, the plan is, I'd love to. I've been with TD for 30 years now, so I would love to maybe transition out of that and retire if possible. But then, to God to give me some new purpose. And so this was interesting how this kind of was brought up and approached to me. And I'm like, Lord, is this you kind of saying, okay, well, maybe this is a season for this, and after that 2-year commitment, do we see that there's more in store that I want for you? And I'm moving away from the business world. So that could be a plan. And in the meantime, it's again continuing to. I look at your group, and there's so much hope and promise, right? To see, again, like I said, the passion, the enthusiasm that you have for your love for the Lord, and if there's any way as someone who's a little older can be kind of to come alongside you guys and and talk to you and mentor that way, that's also something that's something that I'd like to do more of. So yeah. And sorry, in the back, Steve. Yeah.
Way in the back.
Yes.
What's one piece of advice you give your 17-year-old self?
Yeah, very good question. Something that you would give some piece of advice you'd give your 17-year-old self. I think it would be to not be so concerned, and it's easy to say, but not be so concerned of what other people think about who you are, to stand up for what you believe in. I know it's hard when you're 17 because it's so much about other people think, but if you could go back and just, again, be secure in who God made you and all the good things that he has for you, and then to live authentically. I think I would go back and tell myself that. And not be afraid to dream big, not be afraid to say, okay, God, what do you want for me in my life? And opportunities, open those doors and boldly go through them and see what's in store for you. And not to be afraid, because again, life has taught, I know some of us, there's a lot of, it's not all uphill, there's a lot of serious downhills, and those of you who know our story know that, but God is faithful, and he is in the business of restoring and reconciling, right? So it's take the risk, and if we fall and if we fail, it's okay. He will pick us up and gently bring us back and take us back to that mountaintop. So yeah, and I just try to be your authentic self. Yes, sorry, I saw a few hands. I think I saw this hand first, yeah.
What's your vision for the church and the other churches in the congregation?
Yeah, it's a great question. And again, talking to David this week about that, I told him, I'm not a meeting guy. I hate meetings. I just like doing things, right? And I'm not very strategic and visionary, but when it comes to church, I think we can, I can be more, I think, focused and believing what I really believe is the vision. And it's kind of what I mentioned here, right? It's to see, and we talked about it today, and Luis and Sarah, to be more intentional, to see our community, to see our city, to see our country transformed, and to be intentional in our service and how we interact with people. So not for people to see Christians for what they're against, but it's to see what we're for, and once people see what we're for, and if we can put on our smiley face and not walk around with a glum look on our face, people will question and wonder, well, what's different? So that's what I would, my vision is to see unity, right? To see unity in our church, to see bridges built back again where things have been broken. And if I'm affirmed as an elder, to do my part in building those bridges and making those connections again, through praying with people, visiting people, and just, really upholding the body to say we need to be in unity to what God has for the next, 20, 30, 100 years at our church. Yeah. Hey, Ethan.
What led you to say yes when asked to be an elder?
Yeah, thanks. Good question. It was definitely not an immediate yes. And because again, it's not something naturally, it's out of my comfort zone. But first thing I did was, talk to both our dads are not with us, but our moms are alive and they're prayer warriors. So talk to our family, ask them to pray. Rowan and I prayed just to seek God's direction, and then I think it was to say, okay, Lord, I'm still not, I don't know, you read Acts or you read Timothy and Titus and you see the qualifications for what an elder is, and it's pretty daunting, and it's like, I can't do this, right? I'm not meeting up to, these expectations. But then, someone said, no, I think Rowena's mom told me, she's like, but it's not about you. It's about what God wants to do in your life, right? In this position. And that really stuck with me this week, and I'm praying, okay, Lord, I'm going to step out in faith, and if the elders and you have faith in me, and, then I will, to the best of my ability, try to step out, in that respect, right? So, yeah.
One more.
Tim.
How comfortable would you be sharing your vulnerabilities within the eldership, like as it kind of pertains to, like, say, your own vulnerabilities or shortcomings within the eldership?
That's, a really good question. I think it's going back to your authentic self. Like, I think now I'm at a point where, at my age, it's like, you can, Rowena will tell you, I think I still am concerned what people think about me, but not as much. And so most people here, I think, know the struggles, my story and our story and the struggles. And so I think from that point, totally open to being vulnerable, sharing, what I think is what we're doing, right, or what is there other areas that we could be looking at things differently, not just always agreeing to say, okay, this has been the status quo, so let's just continue to do it, but is there other ways we could do something, right? Not so much better, but just, is there something that we've kind of overlooked, right? And so I hope I can, bring that as well too into those type of meetings, right?
Well, I know he keep going with questions. We're going to pray for Arjun and Rowena before he steps away from here. But thank you so much for participating in this process in the weeks leading up until now and in the next few weeks ahead as well. We just ask that you continue to now pray about this and lift Arjuna and Rowena before the Lord. As Rowena mentioned, well, what does it mean to be an elder at West Coast, time-wise, commitment-wise? And so Arjuna hasn't had the privilege of being in elders meetings on a regular basis, and kind of it's like a little new world of like, well, what does that look like at this church? And so he is actually saying, I'm willing, but please review this in 2 years. So he's not actually committing for life like I did. He's committing for a 2-year testing, and then for him and Rowena to review it, as well as for us to review it as elders. And that idea actually has come up within the current elders. We've bounced that around, and we'll talk about that as well in the future. We haven't had an eldership that has 3-year terms or 5-year terms, but we have over many years had elders who did serve for short times because their career moved them, their house moved them, or they took a sabbatical and came back. And we also have, you alluded to this also, how much availability do you have? And even among our current elders, we have different availability, and our wives have different availability. And so sometimes an elder and his wife is available to go and visit a home and pray for you as a couple. Sometimes the spouse isn't available. And in their situation, Arjuna and Rowena both have pretty high jobs, and Rowena travels a fair bit. And so sometimes when she's missing, it's because of travel as well. But that is just the reality of all of our lives. And in the congregation, some of you have that kind of a life as well. And it's good to have people in the eldership who understand your busy situation as well. So let's just pause there. I would say we'll ask for response next week, except because of the Leaders Conference in Vernon, a significant number of people will be away. So in 2 weeks, we'll have a Sunday morning where we simply say, hey, if you were here at the Family Forum, if you heard Arjuna share, we'd like you to respond with a little written piece of paper of, yes, this sounds great. No way. This is against God's will. Do not allow it. Or, I'm easy, uncertain. Anyway, you have three choices, and we might tease about it a little bit, but it is a very somber, important thing. The people who serve as elders direct the decisions of our church and lead our church, and they put in a lot of time and a lot of heart and soul for us. So let's pray for Arjuna and Rowena, and let's just pray for ourselves as we consider. Father, we thank you for the privilege we have of being in a congregation where, when this question of leadership is asked, there's 13 names that are put forward, because there's so many people here who give themselves and serve the body and are recognized as followers of you, who represent you and are an example. And Lord, we've come through this process where today the current elders are recommending Arjuna to join the team, and he's willing to let his name stand. And we ask that in these next 2 weeks that you would just bring everything to light that you want us to know, and that you would bring your voice and your direction and your confirmation, that we might move forward in great faith and great joy as a church. Thank you, Lord, in Jesus' name. Amen. Thank you for letting us ask all those questions.
Thank you.
That was great. Oh, and in case you're wondering, working at TD Bank doesn't make Arjuna love spreadsheets. So no, he is not taking Tony's place as treasurer. All right? Tony tried, don't worry. But sometimes Arjuna's job is taking his clients to watch the Canucks play or something like that, and those kind of cool things. All right, so let's just move forward in our agenda. Daycare leadership team recruitment. Just an announcement about several areas where leaders are needed. You know, we have a team of elders that govern the church. We have a school board that governs the school program under the team of elders. And we need a new team to govern the daycare moving forward. A leadership team for the daycare. We have staff. We have Brady as a director. But the team who thinks about the policies and reviews things as they come in, thinks about promotion, thinks about the business plan side of things. And we're specifically looking, are there people among us who have experience with daycare? Have you had your children in daycare? And out of that, you have some knowledge. Hey, you mean the architecture side? Awesome. Very good. Well, you will be interested in a minute, because we're going to go next door and you can see the design that's coming. Yeah. I didn't know that. That's cool. So anyone that has experience, and not just if you have experience, but if you feel you would like to be part of that leadership team, we're looking at, this isn't just a business. This is a ministry of the church of saying, how can our church touch our neighborhood and touch the families who use that service? We have space for 24 children. And so if you're interested in being part of the leadership team, if you could let one of the elders know, hey, I'm interested in talking more about that or exploring that idea, we would love to talk to you about that. Before we look at the budget for the construction, you're going to get tomorrow or Tuesday in the mail, you're going to get a 2-page letter from the elders about some fundraising for the spring. And we're combining two things. There's a financial need for the school, which I want to address now, but there's a desire to finish the construction phase 2, not just phase 1 for next door. And rather than having competing calls for finance, we just wrapped it into one letter and said, as a church, this is what we're doing. Here's the update of how it's going, and you're going to hear that today, but you'll get it again in the letter. And can we give towards this overall need that we have as a church, and here's how we would like to use the funds. I want to address that we had a significant budget loss in the school the past 2 years. This year, the school budget is losing $130,000. And the school board has been thinking about this and reviewing this since November. So we've been well aware of how this year is coming together. So I want to just tell you what the factors were of that, and yet why we have so much hope for the future. And I think this is the first time in 30 years that we've actually asked for funds for the program. We've had fundraising for school buildings, for the school bus, things like that. But for budget, we have had gains and we've had losses. I remember we lost $100,000 another time, and then we made it up the year after. But we haven't had to come and say we specifically need to take care of this year's budget like we are this year. So what's happening there is, going back about 4 or 5 years ago, the school board, as the ages kept growing, we got into graduation years, because of course originally we had grades 1 to 3, 1 to 4, 1 to 6, and then we started graduating. We wanted to improve the high school program so that we didn't have some classes offered online, but we could have a full teaching program. We also wanted to improve the transition that sometimes happens at grade 8, where you'd have families that put their children in through K to 8, and then they move to a bigger school with more options for the high school, and that depletes our high school even more, which means we can offer even less. So in that situation, in David's final 5 or 6 years as principal, the school was continuing to build stronger and stronger, and we increased our offering in middle school and high school. We brought in more staff to offer a complete full program, and you don't have to take physics online to get physics. So we have, for many years, we've been offering everything that's needed if you want to go straight into an engineering class or straight into a nursing program. So yes, the students are taking the same program in high school, but they have everything they need to go those 2 tracks. That is a little bit costly because we've beefed up what we're offering as the school is growing. Right at that time, COVID came, and we instantly lost some international students, which is kind of some extra income that comes in. And then we lost 10 students that were local because their families with COVID couldn't have them in school. And then we, at the same time, went through a leadership transition where David was retiring, and the transition to the vice principal then stopped, and we were looking for a principal again. We had 3 people who wanted the job but couldn't find housing. And then we had me as an interim. The next year we had David Wu as an interim. And now, last January, we are so thankful that one of our teachers, Janice Manzola, said yes, and he is now in his first year as principal. He is doing a wonderful job. The confidence of everyone is just growing. And yet this year, we had quite a bit of transition with families that we hired teachers for in the fall, but then by October, they had moved away. And in December, 2 more batches moved away. And in February, someone else moved away. So we've this year had a number of students that have actually left for other jobs in other parts of the country, and that all affects the income of this year, and you don't suddenly lay off teachers halfway through the year, right? On top of that, all the schools in BC experienced a teacher shortage from 3 years ago until now, because the province lowered the class size for public schools, and now all the public schools needed more teachers. So all schools have had a shortage of teachers and substitutes and that kind of thing, and us included. The result of that is the pay scale climbs drastically, and we have made a commitment years ago that we are on a parallel to a benchmark set by Society of Christian Schools BC, which is a mirror image of the public school system, and it spaces out the different positions in the school. So we are we're not at that line, we're 4% from that line is what we're paying our teachers. So that went up. Also, as the baby boomers retired, the upper end went up because they're trying to retain long-term employees. All the factors you're hearing means the cost of the school has continued to go up. In spite of all of that, this year's budget would be balanced if you had 14 more students. So just forget everything you heard and just say, you know what? If we had 14 more students, with everything as it is, it balances. And our school has saved so much money because our property is classroom only. We're not paying for sports fields and gymnasiums. We have one 2 blocks away at the community center. We have the best AstroTurf and 6 soccer fields over here at Hastings Park. And we go skiing and sailing, and the city is our classroom. So the school board is feeling that in response to that, how should we respond? We actually met with, we had 4 nights where we invited parents to come and talk with the school board, and we talked with 54 parents over 4 evenings. And Tristan and I did those meetings together, and he's going to come and say a few things that have come out of that. But our feeling is that the parents are re-engaging after COVID. Those meetings were the first time they had seen each other. Some of them the first time they're meeting. Some of them this year is the first time they've been in the building because for 2 years they couldn't come into the school building. And it feels like a reawakening, and things are looking very bright for the future. Enrollment is bouncing back for next fall. But we're feeling like with this year's loss, we need to come to the long-term supporters as well as parents and say, can we just give generously and put $100,000 back into the budget so that next year's staff isn't cutting things really tight, but we can just go back to where we were 5 years ago and continue building, and with keeping all the programs that we have and seeing enrollment come forward. So you're going to get a letter tomorrow or Tuesday that kind of wraps up what I've just said. And I'll take questions in just a minute, but I want to first of all have Tristan come. And he and I were together in a bunch of parent meetings, and then the strategic weekend that was held with some staff and some consultants. And just your off-the-cuff perspectives out of those times.
Thanks, David. So the evenings that we had with the parents were incredibly encouraging and confirming that the school is having an impact on people's lives and doing God's will. And when we met with SCSBC, that was also very confirming that what we are doing, we need to keep on doing it. So I think as a board, we think about, we don't pat ourselves on the shoulders all the time saying that we're doing a great job. We're always talking about how do we do more? How do we solve problems that are in our group? And SCSBC confirmed that we need to have ambitions for more. There's an incredible demand for Christian schooling in Vancouver, and I think people need to know that. People here need to know that. And what we're doing, what this church is doing, what this community is doing is something that's unique. We have a unique opportunity. And I think we need to be thinking about, are we a church about Christian school? Because there's a demand in Vancouver for Christian education, and there's a scarcity. And not just a scarcity in terms of schooling, but there's a scarcity of growth opportunities. And something that just really sunk in for me is that we have a block that is basically being offered to us. And I'm talking outside of our immediate needs, and I don't usually think about future for the school as much. I'm more interested in what's our immediate issues. And this weekend really pushed me to look beyond and to share in what David's been thinking about. And I'm shaking a little bit. People want us to take over the property there. We don't have the funds to do it right now, but it's being offered to us, and if we are struggling for words, but if we had the ability to take on that, the people would come and the school would be full. And so it's really exciting for me right now, because this vision that David's had for a number of years for expanding 250, I think it's real. And I don't think it's a matter of whether we should expand. It's about how do we just do this. And so I felt really encouraged from conversations with the parents that they affirmed that this is something that is good and it's needed, and that SCSBC also encourages as well that there's a scarcity and people want what we're offering. And there's obviously some challenges, but I think they can be overcome. So I had other things to say, but I'm not very good at following my notes when I'm up in front of a crowd. So anyways, I think I'll leave it there. Yeah.
Stay here. Let's take a few questions on just the school budget updates. What do you want to ask? Linda's pointing. Oh, over here. Sorry, Martin.
Yeah, this is very encouraging. And of course, we have had the vision to grow the school for quite a while. Do we have a concrete plan on how to accomplish it? And how can we collaborate with other churches? It seems to be crucial to me. We don't have that many kids here in our own church. I guess a large percentage of them attend the school already, right? How can we really work together with other churches who want to send their kids to Christian school? And yeah.
Very good question. For those of you online, how can we collaborate with other churches? One of the things that was very evident at these parent meetings was that we were talking to Christian people who really, really wanted their children to have a Christian worldview. And we were hearing from at least 5 other churches that we have 5 churches that have a number of families from each church in our church. And I think in those meetings, we had 3 different pastors who were at those meetings with us. And so the attitude that you get from them is, our church doesn't have the ability to do this, but thank you so much for providing this school. We're so thankful that this is here. And how can we help? And so it feels like we were on that path of growth when David was leading, and it got interrupted with a leadership change and with COVID. But as we re-engage, it's there again, and if not more than. When we started talking about the availability of adjacent property, most of the schools that Society of Christian Schools relates to are property bound. They don't really have any other option. And so the fact that our high school location is rented and has double the space available, and the owner wants us to take over the whole property, plus some storefronts that are like our East Village kids, the availability of that, the parents that we're talking to is like, well, how much would that cost? Oh, 2 or 3 million? Well, we could do that, right? And so you see that kind of a buy-in happening of, it does feel like there's an opportunity to partner with other churches and towards that. But it feels like we had this 3-year stall that happened, and it feels like it's on good footing for the future. Any other question? Tim? How much has the shortfall been, mortgage or rental increase? Not negligible. Yeah, we have 400,000 on the mortgage, which is partially East Village kids and partially school. And the rent went up 10%, but we're still paying less than $3,000 a month for rent.
It's still all mostly on teachers. That's where all the costs are.
The teacher staff, or the teacher-student ratio is the, yeah.
So that change in the number of students, does that affect our classroom sizes? Or
No. Yeah, our classroom sizes have always been lower than what the government, yeah. Yeah, so we would like to be able to retain the students right through middle school, and we're offering a good program to do that. So, yeah. Yes? If we had students online and add them to the school? So it'd mean broadcasting the current classroom and having some students that are off-site, you mean? That's an interesting thought.
So maybe I can speak to that. So one of the highlights of our school to our parents is that every morning our students are called by are recognized and greeted by name. And so in-person schooling is part of our DNA, yeah, our culture and our identity. And so I mean, I think there's opportunities for that in the future, but I don't think that's where we see our growth. So
Yeah, the parents are really like so many comments about, I feel known. My child is known, and how meaningful that is. Tanya? Right. What I mean by being property bound and opportunity. Couple of things here. The demand for independent private schools, Christian or not, is growing a lot in the last 5 years. So all schools that are outside the public system have a increased knocking on the door wanting to come. If you Google search, I want a Christian school in Vancouver, you're going to find 2. There's only 2 schools that go K to 12, us and Vancouver Christian School, which is over by Boundary Road and Grandview Highway, that area. So it's very expensive to find property in Vancouver. SCSBC talks about others that are in New West and Burnaby and North Van, different places, where they have their location, but they don't really have any other opportunity to grow, and yet the enrollment is growing. They have people knocking on the door wanting to come. So the fact that we have property in Vancouver where we own our campus already, we also own East Village Kids, which is right next door and is used for after-school care and preschool. We could actually put a class in there and still have after-school care if we move the preschool to another room in the school. So just that's one opportunity. We have that storefront available for school. At the other end of the block, we have a high school campus in a rented upstairs, and the business that's downstairs, the owner would like to retire. And we've known him for 20 years. He's a friend of ours. And he likes the school, and he likes the idea of the school taking over the whole property. We like the idea of buying it. He likes the idea of a 100-year lease and taking care of his son that way. We'll hash that out some other day. But the point is, the owner would be very happy for us to use that whole facility. Between that facility and ours, in the apartments, there's 2 more commercial spaces underneath, which are not like storefront businesses, they're just storage spaces. And so the thinking is that probably the owners would be favorable to selling if you had the right price. So it feels like those opportunities that we have for growth without having to move locations are very special.
there's also a house that's next door to the school, and the owners not offered to give it to us, but they want us to buy it. They love our kids. They love that the school is right there. The other thing is Vancouver Christian School went through an expansion recently, and what we've been told from SCSBC is they looked at 50 properties, and they were shut down. They looked at 50 properties, and they couldn't move into them. It just wouldn't work. And so they had to expand on the property that they had. And that just affirms that there's a scarcity of property available for any future Christian schools, yet the demand is increasing. So.
And the last time we had to expand into high school, the city did the development zoning thing, and they said, oh, there's no complaints, approved. And we need to move on for the sake of time. Yep, Ken?
That's right. Yeah, thanks for clarifying that.
John Knox in Vancouver. Okay. Ken's just referring to the schools in Burnaby and the challenges with that city council. Glenn? Mm-hmm. Mm. Hmm.
And I believe that if we ask God for that, He will bless this school abundantly, lavishly, greatly, beyond our expectations.
Hmm.
So I want to encourage you when you pray for this school that you're praying in the right way and it will come to pass.
All right, thank you. So we'll close there, but please feel free to ask more questions. I just want to move on for the sake of time. Um, the budget for the construction next door is looking very healthy, and as in we're not going over budget. We'll get to that in a minute. We want to finish the whole project. We're excited about that, but we just felt like we need to bring to the church the knowledge of what happened this year at the school, and it is our responsibility. We are coming to the school of families, but keep in mind what life is like when you're a young family with young kids. Paying school fees is about all you can manage, and that's challenging for some as well. So we're not pushing parents hard to say, hey, can you give more? We're making people aware, and we're saying this is a need. But really what the parents can help with is enrollment. That if we just bump the enrollment up, we can keep the same programs, and that will be fine. So we want to come to you, and the letter that you get will say, hey, let's finish next door, but as we raise money for that, let's take the first 100,000 and put it towards the school deficit. So rather than have two separate fundraisers, but if you really want to designate one way or the other and say, actually, I want to give this gift to the wheelchair ramp, and I don't want to, fine, do that. But you're going to get a letter that says, the elders are just saying, here's the total need as a church. It's all God's kingdom. It's all his responsibility. And yet we want to not forget about where the school is at. We want to take responsibility for that. We'd like to fundraise towards the rest of the project, but we'd like the first 100,000 to go to the school budget of this year. So now let's go on to the exciting part and look at where we're at with, and now you can put this screen up, which you should also have in your hand. A little over a year ago, November of 2021, we had a family forum like this, where having received development permits and a good budget, we said we would need to fundraise $1.3 million to do this office daycare property restoration, and we were ready to say we probably can't do it. And then after the family forum, various ones of you felt God speak. There's different prophetic words, things happen, and we came back to the church in December, I think it was, or November, and we said, actually, if we raise 800,000 by the end of January, we will greenlight the project, because that would be enough that we could get the daycare launched even if the rest of the project wasn't quite done. We could leave the landscaping, we could not do the parking lot, different things like that. What you saw at that time was the budget on the left side of the blue line, but you also saw it on the right side was broken into phase 1 and phase 2, which I didn't put on the screen today. The numbers you see on the left side are the numbers that you saw September or November of 2021, about 15 months ago. After we gave 800,000 in January, a year ago, the architect, then the electrical, the mechanical, the structural, they all drew their plans, and they went back and forth with the city and found out what would have to be done structurally and so forth, and then those were priced, and by the end of July, we had received new pricing. Keep in mind we had a COVID supply chain shortfall going on at that time, and we came up with a number that you have in the small print of row 1, 1.247855. That's the opening budget once the engineered drawings were completed, July of this, about 9 months ago. And with that budget, we started the project. That number on the construction side, not including rows 2 to 8, but just the inside and outside construction portion of the renovation, that number has climbed a little bit. It's at 1.3, and you can see on the right side some of the things that are going into that. The city required us to do a major sewer upgrade, which we didn't think we would have to do. Also a major water service upgrade that we hadn't planned on doing. And we ran an extra electric line. We also found a buried oil tank, so forth and so on. But keep in mind that back on the left side of the line, down to row 8, we had put in almost 300,000 for a contingency. We put in a 20% contingency. And so now using some of that, plus you'll see a significant drop in landscape costs from what was actually projected to what the reality is going to be. We're going to save quite a bit there. And so those things together end up with a total budget of row 10 that is less than what we were projecting in November. That then comes into a total cost in row 13, and the donations that have come in are almost to 900,000 now, which leaves us with about 340,000 that we would still need to raise. So what you'll see in the letter that you get next week will be rounded up to 350 plus 100 for the school, and we're asking, let's all just come before the Lord and say, Lord, how much can I help with this? The elders would like to see us just finish the project. We had said 800,000 we could do phase 1, even if phase 2 doesn't happen. But over the long term, we're going to save money if we do it all at once. And we're not going to have the 3 years of dirt piles like we had the last time we put a pause on it. You might remember when the front entrance was blocked off for 3 years with gravel. And so the hope is that we can complete the whole project. What questions do you have? The phase 1 is already taken care of, already done or paid for. That would be to do phase 2. Yeah. We're very, very happy with how things are going. Also, the slowdown with COVID supply chain issues, that's kind of almost gone. So the contractor's not having the trouble he was getting supplies 2 years ago. For the school. Oh, for the daycare. Brady, you're here? What do you want to say about enrollment for the daycare? So we haven't actually opened up a public, but we're getting a lot of requests to just repeat for those of you online. Yeah, can you tell us what he said? You should have come up here. So even without advertising yet, and we don't think it will be ready until end of August or 1st of September, he's even now getting 2 to 3 calls every week saying, when does your daycare open? And we only have 24 spaces. The thing that I would put out as a prayer request, though, is hiring staff. We also have people expressing interest, and Brady's talking to people as well, but let's be praying for the staff for the daycare as well as the staff for the school. Both are industries right now that have shortages for staff. Brady, at this location, how many people will we have working here on it when we're full? 6 So 6 people that we would be looking to hire. Okay. Other questions? Yeah. Why don't you come up here, because there's people that can't hear you without the... Brady is the director of East Village Kids, which was started 8 years ago when school families asked, can you have after-school care? And there was a government grant involved with some of that and shared with that. And so that property and renovation was paid for then, and Brady became the director of that, and as well as a preschool. What's the relation between that and the daycare?
So the daycare is an expansion of the preschool and out-of-school care. So the staff, there will be overlap of staff, likely some that will work in both centers and things like that. But it'll be treated as one staff together.
And earlier when we said that we're looking for our leadership team, so just think, you could be working with him. No, but seriously, we would like to see a strong team of 5 people come together to help with how these things get set up, and then the staff as well. And let's be praying for who God puts in that. And let's, as a congregation, keep in mind, like, how is this ministry being used by God to further his kingdom, and not just say, oh, it's a business, it takes care of itself. Yeah. Any other questions? Okay, so as we go next door, a few words about how things are. When you go across the sidewalk here, before you go in, go up to the wheelchair ramp and have a look, and you'll see the new entrance being formed in. The concrete work is being formed into the entrance that will not be open today. When you go to the front steps, there's a board that lays at an angle. There is a handrail, but if you're older, it's kind of slippery, just be careful there. And then when you go inside, there's lots and lots of tripping hazards. The staircase that goes from upstairs to downstairs is cut in half, and it's now a narrow staircase. That's going to be taken out soon, and eventually the only entrance will be up the front here or the back here, and then 2 exits on the bottom, but we won't have an inside connection between, and that gave us 100 square feet upstairs and downstairs that we didn't have before. So you can use it now, but the handrail's loose, it's not up to code. Please be careful. And with children, take your children, but just be careful that they're not bumping an older person off the hand railings. All right? If we could take our garbage, is there a... Oh, if you could please get your children first, and then put all of your garbage on that table over here. Oh, and cookies. That's what you're trying to tell me. There's cookies. All right, have a good day. Oh, I should also mention, next door, every room is labeled with a pink tab, so you can look for the pink tabs. And there are blueprints on the wall. And here's another set of blueprints if you're not going next door and you want to look at them, they're here. Addison, where's Addison? If anyone sees Addison, can someone else take it? If somebody wants to carry the camera for the tour, Addison forgot. Over. Go, who wants to be the camera guy? Just take the tablet from...
The big room at the back is the new multi-purpose room. These are all offices along here.
We are going to hit or whatever.
I know, like David's office.
Cubbies are up there. They come in through.
It's like the main entrance.
This the main entrance is that big door. Here, this is the play area up there as well. Tables will be over there, and then back to where over there. When you walk in, it's designed well. It's a raised